5,000 years ago, in the land of Mesopotamia, a strange thing happened. The ground wept. Black, sticky mud seeped up from the earth. The Babylonians saw this. Did not know what it was. It smelled foul. It ruined good farm soil. Animals avoided it. It was a nuisance. But the Babylonians were smart builders. They built boats to sail on the rivers. The boats leaked. Water came through the wood. The boats sank. People lost their goods. They needed a fix. They tried mud. They tried clay. Nothing worked. Then someone looked at the black nuisance. They smeared it on the wood. The water stopped. The black slime hardened. It sealed the gaps. This was bitumen. The Babylonians used it for waterproofing. They used it to stick bricks together for tall towers. A problem became a tool. This black substance was dangerous. If it caught fire, it burned hot. It could not be put out with water. It burned buildings to the ground. Yet people sought it out. They walked miles to collect it from surface pools. They risked the fires. They risked the smell. Why? Because a dry boat meant survival. A strong wall meant safety. The contrast was sharp. The liquid was a destroyer and a protector at the same time. The knowledge of oil moved east, reached China. But the Chinese did not just wait for the ground to weep. They decided to dig. This was a huge change. Digging into the earth was hard work. The soil was hard. Rocks blocked the way. Water filled the holes. Most people gave up. But not the Chinese salt miners. In the year 347 AD, during the Jin dynasty, miners worked in the Sichuan province. They wanted salt. Salt was money. Salt kept food fresh. Get salt, they had to dig deep. They hit brine water, but sometimes they hit a dark, smelly liquid. This was oil. The miners did not want oil. They wanted salt. Oil ruined the salt. It was a frustrating problem. But they kept digging. They needed a better way to dig deeper. They invented a new method. They did not use shovels. They used bamboo. Bamboo is strong. Bamboo is hollow. They tied long bamboo poles together. They made a heavy iron bit. They attached the bit to a cable made of bamboo fibers. They built a tall wooden tower. They dropped the heavy iron bit. It smashed the rock. They pulled it up. They dropped it again. This was percussion drilling. It was slow. It was loud. Took days to dig a few feet, but it worked. They kept going. 60 meters down, 70 meters down, 90 meters down. This was shocking. No one had gone that deep before. The air got hot. The ropes frayed. The men sweated. At these depths, the brine was pure, but sometimes the black oil rushed up. It squirted out of the hole. It covered the men. It ruined their clothes. But they learned to collect it. They used the oil to light lamps. They used it to grease their axles. They had solved the puzzle. They had turned a nuisance into a resource by going deep. For hundreds of years after that, the world stayed quiet about oil. The Chinese kept their drilling methods secret for a long time. In the Middle East, people still collected surface oil. In Europe, people found small seeps. They bottled the oil. They sold it as medicine. They called it Seneca oil. They claimed it cured headaches. They claimed it cured stomach aches. It did not cure much. It was a trick. The world needed a real use for oil. The world needed a push. That push came from a problem with light. In the early 1800s, cities grew fast. People moved to cities for work. The cities got crowded. At night, the cities were dark. People used candles. Candles cost too much. Poor people could not buy them. People used whale oil. Whales were hunted in the oceans. The whale oil made a bright light. But whales were hard to find. The whales were being killed faster than they could breed. The price of whale oil went up. People could not afford to light their homes. Factories could not run at night. The world was stuck. Scientists looked for a new fuel. They knew coal oil could burn. But coal oil was smoky, smelled bad. It made people cough. Then scientists looked at petroleum. It was the black liquid from the ground. Could it be cleaned? Could it be made to burn clean? James Young in Scotland figured it out. He found a seep of oil. He heated it in a closed pot. He collected the gas. He cooled the gas. It turned into a clear liquid. This liquid burned bright. It burned clean. It did not smell bad. He called it kerosene. This was the secret. The black nuisance could be transformed. But Young used oil from coal mines. The world needed pure oil from the ground. While Young worked in Scotland, others worked in Russia. The land of Baku sat on the Caspian Sea. The ground there was weird. It had big holes. Black mud bubbled out of the holes. The air smelled of gas. Sometimes the gas caught fire. Tall flames shot into the sky. People called it the eternal fire. The locals had scooped oil from these pits for centuries. But the Russian Empire wanted more. They wanted industrial-scale oil. They did not want to scoop. They wanted to pump. In 1846, a major change happened. A man named Vasily Semyonov directed a project. He brought a drill to a place called Bibi Hebat. This was not a bamboo drill. This was a machine drill. They used a steam engine. The engine turned a crank. The crank pushed a drill bit into the earth. It was noisy. The steam hissed. The metal screeched against rock. The ground shook. People came to watch. They had never seen a machine attack the earth before. It was a scary sight. The drill went down. It broke through sand. It broke through clay. It found the oil pocket. The oil rushed up. It was not a trickle. It was a flow. The first industrial oil well was born. You did not have to dig a big hole with shovels. You did not have to wait for a seep. You could force a hole into the rock and pull the oil out. This was the Baku success. But this news traveled slow. The rest of the world was not paying full attention yet. A few years later, the focus shifted to Europe. A small town called Bobruka in Poland, a man had an idea. His name was Ignacy Lukasiewicz. He was a pharmacist. He worked with chemicals, read about the kerosene made in Scotland. He knew there was oil seeping in the hills near his town. He wanted to make his own kerosene. He wanted to light the lamps of Poland. Lukasiewicz worked hard. He gathered the black oil from the ditches. He set up distillation pots. He heated the oil. He made mistakes. The oil exploded. The fires burned his equipment. He lost money. His friends told him to stop. They said he was crazy. They said the black mud was useless. But Lukasiewicz did not stop. He fixed his pots. He controlled the heat. Finally made a clear drop of kerosene. He put it in a glass lamp. He lit the wick. The light filled the room. It was a soft, steady light. It was better than the whale oil. It was better than the candle. He had his fuel. Now he needed more oil. The ditches were drying up. He needed to dig. In 1854, he joined with other business people. They went to the forest in Bobruka. They did not have a steam engine. They used men. They used hand tools. They dug a shaft down into the rock. The work was brutal. The ground was wet. The walls caved in. Men got hurt. They had to build wooden frames to hold the dirt back. They dug deeper. They used buckets on ropes to pull the dirt out. After months of digging, they struck oil. It was not a gusher. It was a slow seep into the bottom of the shaft. They bailed it out with buckets. It was a small amount, but it was steady. This mine in Böbrücke became special. It did not dry up. It kept producing oil. It became the oldest oil mine in the world that never stopped working. It proved that patient, hard work could get the oil, but it was still slow. It was still hard labor. The world needed a faster way. The world needed a hero, or maybe just a stubborn man. Across the ocean, in America, the problem was the same. Whales were dying. The price of light was too high. A group of investors in New Haven, Connecticut, saw the chance. You can tell that baby antitosis. They formed the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company. They heard about oil seeps in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The oil bubbled up in a creek called Oil Creek. The Native Americans had shown it to settlers years before. The settlers used it for medicine, but these investors wanted to sell it for light. The investors sent a man to Titusville. His name was Edwin Drake. He was not an engineer. He was not a geologist. He was a retired railroad conductor. He had a special pass from the railroad. People called him Colonel Drake. It was a fake title, but it sounded important. Drake arrived in Titusville in 1858. He looked at the creek. He saw the oil slicks on the water. He knew he had to get the oil out of the ground. But how? The ground was rocky. The water table was high. If he dug a hole like the men in Poland, it would fill with water. The oil would float away. He needed a different plan. He watched the Chinese drilling methods in books. He watched the salt well drillers in Pennsylvania. They used percussion drilling. They dropped a heavy iron bit. Drake decided to do the same, but he had to keep the water out. Drake had a brilliant idea. He drove a pipe into the ground. It was a large iron pipe. He drove it down until it hit solid rock. The water could not get into the pipe. Then he put a smaller drill bit inside the pipe. The drill bit hit the rock at the bottom. The pipe kept the hole open. The pipe kept the water out. This was the drive pipe. It was a simple idea, but no one had done it for oil before. It solved the biggest problem. The work started in the spring of 1859. It was slow. Drake hired a man named William Uncle Billy Smith. Smith was a blacksmith and a well digger. Smith ran the steam engine. The engine chugged. The walking beam went up and down. Clack, clack, clack. The drill hit the rock. The progress was inches a day. The investors back in Connecticut got nervous. Drake asked for more money. They sent it, but it was not enough. The money ran out. The investors stopped writing checks. Drake had no money to pay Smith. Drake had no money to buy food. The investors in Connecticut were nervous men. They had formed a group called the Seneca Oil Company of New Haven. A lawyer named James Townsend led the group. Townsend had seen the oil from Pennsylvania. He believed it was the future. But the other investors were scared, who had put in their savings. They had put in their business money. They watched Drake spend their money with no results. They sent angry letters. They asked for daily reports. Drake wrote back with short answers. Still drilling. Rock is hard. Need more money. The investors grew tired of these letters. They stopped replying. The engine Drake used was a small steam engine. It was a 6-horsepower engine. It was not big. It looked weak for the job. Sat on a wooden platform. A leather belt connected the engine to the drill. The belt slipped. The belt broke. Smith had to fix it constantly. The sound was constant. Chug, chug, clack, clack. It never stopped. The people in Titusville got used to the noise. Then they started to hate the noise. They saw it as the sound of failure. The people in Titusville laughed. They watched the crazy colonel every day. They watched him stare at the hole. They watched the machine clack and clack with no results. They thought he was a fool. They thought the railroad man had lost his mind. The store owners would not give him credit. He had to write letters to friends, to beg for food money. The tension was high. Drake was close to giving up. He had failed at everything else in his life. This felt like another failure. Summer came. The weather got hot. The flies buzzed around the well. The machine kept clacking. Drake and Smith kept working. They refused to quit. They were too stubborn. They had nothing else to do. They were in too deep. The drill went past the hard rock. It hit a softer layer. The drilling got easier. They were at 69 feet. Drake felt something was different. The bit dropped faster. It did not hit solid resistance. It fell into a cavity. It was Saturday evening, August 27th, 1859. Drake was not at the well. He was resting at his hotel. He was sick and tired. Uncle Billy Smith was cleaning up for the night. Smith noticed something shiny in the hole. He looked closer. It was dark liquid. It was rising up the pipe. It was not water. It was thick. It was black. It smelled of gas. Smith dropped a tin cup down the hole. He pulled it up. The cup was full of oil. The oil kept rising. It spilled over the top of the pipe. It ran onto the ground. It flowed into the creek. Smith ran to get Drake. Drake came back. He saw the oil flowing. He did not cheer. He was too tired. He just watched. The next day, Sunday, they collected the oil in whiskey barrels. They filled 25 barrels. The oil was brown and green, not black. It was crude oil. It was real. The news spread fast. The controversy ended. Crazy Drake was not crazy. He was a genius. The Drake well was born. The oil came out of the ground fast, but nobody thought about how to store it. Used wooden barrels. They used old whiskey barrels. They used empty fish barrels. They ran out of barrels. The oil spilled onto the ground. It ran into the creek. The creek caught fire. The fire burned for days. The fish died. The water was ruined. The men did not care. They just wanted the money. At first, a barrel of oil sold for $20. Then, everyone found oil. The supply was huge. The demand was low. The price dropped. It dropped to $10. Then it dropped to 50 cents. A barrel of oil was worth less than the barrel itself. The chaos was complete. Men who spent all their money to drill a well got pennies for their oil. The boom turned into a bust. The problem was clear. Pennsylvania had oil. But the oil was trapped in small, separate pockets. You found a pocket. You drained it, and the well died. The geology was hard. The rock did not hold a lot of oil. As the years passed, the pumps pulled up more water than oil. The great wells of Pennsylvania dried up. The derricks stood empty. The wooden towers rotted. The world could not be the same place. The price of oil started to go back up. The world needed light. The world needed more oil. The people in the oil business had a new challenge. They had to find a new place to dig. They had to find a place with more oil. But where? The geologists said Pennsylvania was it. They said there was no oil anywhere else. They were wrong. Far away from Pennsylvania, in the southern state of Texas, a different story was starting. Texas was a rough place. It was hot. The land was flat. There were no big forests. There were no big cities. There were cattle and cowboys. In the southeastern part of Texas, near the Gulf of Mexico, there was a flat area of land. In the middle of this flat land, there was a strange hill. The hill was about 15 feet high. It was covered in gray dirt. The dirt was salty, cracked. The ground around the hill had puddles of dark water. If you walked near the puddles, bubbles rose from the mud. The bubbles smelled bad. They smelled of sulfur. Who opened, the local people avoided the hill. They thought the gas was poison. They called the hill Sour Mound. One man did not avoid the hill. His name was Patillo Higgins. Higgins was a tough man. He was a businessman. He made bricks. He sold timber. He had gotten into a fight years ago. In the fight, he lost his left arm. He wore a wooden hook. People thought he was strange. But Higgins was smart. He was also curious. He went to church, taught a Sunday school class. One Sunday he took his class to the flat land near the hill. He showed them the bubbling puddles. He asked them what caused the bubbles. The students did not know. Higgins thought he knew. He believed the bubbles were caused by underground gas. He believed the gas came from a giant pool of oil deep under the hill. Wanted to drill. Higgins did not know how to drill. He did not have any money. He had an idea, but he needed help. He tried to get money from local businessmen. They laughed at him. They said he was a crazy one-armed man. They said there was no oil in Texas. The experts in the North agreed. They said the rock in Texas was wrong. They said oil needed a certain type of rock. Texas did not have it. Higgins did not listen to the experts. He was stubborn. Formed a company. He called it the Gladys City Oil, Gas and Manufacturing Company. He named it after a girl he knew. He leased the land around the hill. He hired a man to drill. You can try myself. The drilling started in 1893. It was a disaster. The drill hit soft clay. The hole kept caving in. The mud sucked the drill pipes down. They would pull the pipes out, and the hole would fill with dirt. They tried to put a metal pipe in the hole to hold the dirt back. The pipe bent. It broke. They tried again. They failed again. The men Higgins hired did not know what they were doing. They used old, weak equipment. After a few months, they gave up. The locals laughed louder. Higgins was angry. He had spent his own money. He had no results. He put up signs on the land. The signs said, "Keep out." He walked away. But he did not give up on the idea. He just needed someone better. Years passed. Higgins wrote letters. He sent letters to men in the oil business. He asked them to come to Texas. Most men threw the letters away. But one letter reached a man in Washington, D.C. The man was Captain Anthony Lucas. Lucas was not a ship captain. He was an engineer. He was an immigrant from Croatia. His real name was Luka. He studied mining. He studied salt. He was a smart man. He read Higgins's letter. He looked at the maps, read the reports about the sulfur gas. Lucas got interested. Lucas traveled to Texas to see the hill. He walked around the flat land. He saw the bubbles. He smelled the sulfur. He scraped the dirt. He saw the salt crystals. Lucas knew something the other experts did not know. He knew about salt domes. A salt dome is a giant pillar of solid salt deep under the ground. Over millions of years, the heavy salt pushes up from the deep earth. It forces the rock layers above it to bend and break. These broken rocks create perfect spaces for oil to gather. Lucas believed the hill was on top of a salt dome. He believed there was a massive amount of oil under that hill. Lucas agreed to help. Higgins gave him a lease. Lucas went back to Washington. He tried to get money to drill. He asked his friends. He asked banks. No one wanted to give him money. Texas was too far away. It was too risky. Finally, two men from Pittsburgh agreed to give him money. Their names were James Guffey and John Gailey. They were oil men. They had money. They sent Lucas the money. Lucas bought the best equipment he could find. He did not buy the old cable tools that Drake used. Cable tools went up and down. They smashed the rock. Lucas bought a new kind of machine. It was a rotary drill. A rotary drill has a sharp bit on the end of a hollow pipe. The engine spins the pipe. The bit grinds the rock into dust. It was much faster. It would go through hard rock. Moving the equipment to Texas was hard. The train tracks did not go all the way to the hill. Lucas had to hire wagons. The wagons got stuck in the mud. The heavy boilers sunk into the dirt. It took months to move everything. The men had to build a road. They had to build a camp. The heat was brutal. The mosquitoes were terrible. The men slept in canvas tents. They drank bad water. Some of them got sick, but Lucas pushed them. He was a strict boss. He wanted the well drilled. They started drilling in October 1900. The rotary drill was loud. The pipe spun fast. The rock ground down. They pushed deeper into the earth. They hit layers of sand. They hit layers of clay. They hit solid rock. The drill pushed through it all. They used a new kind of mud to keep the hole open. They pumped the mud down the hollow pipe. The mud cooled the drill bit. The mud pushed the rock dust up to the surface. It was a clean process. It worked well. They passed 600 feet, past 700 feet. They passed 800 feet. The rock got harder. The drill bit wore out. They had to stop. They had to pull all the pipe out of the hole. It took days. They put a new drill bit on. They pushed the pipe back down. It was slow, hard work. December came. The money from Guffey and Gailey was running out. He realized it. The investors were nervous. Lucas sent them letters. He told them the drilling was going well. He told them the rock showed signs of oil. He asked for more money. The men in Pittsburgh did not want to send more money. They thought they had wasted their first investment. But Lucas demanded it, said he was close. Finally, they sent a little more money. The drilling continued. They reached 880 feet. The drill brought up a new type of rock. It was a dark, coarse sand. The sand had a strong smell. It smelled of gas, smelled of oil. Lucas saw the sand. His heart beat fast. He knew they were close. He told the men to be careful. He told them to watch the mud. They pushed the drill to 10-20 feet. The mud started to act strange. The mud bubbled when it came out of the hole. The flow of mud was not steady. It would stop, then gush out. This meant gas was entering the hole. The gas was under high pressure. It was pushing the mud up. On the afternoon of January 9th, 1901, the gas pressure got too high. The mud started shooting out of the top of the hole. It went 50 feet in the air. The roar was loud. The men shut off the engines. The mud kept coming out. It covered the wooden floor of the drilling platform. It covered the men. The men slipped and fell. They were afraid. The gas was pouring out of the hole. It smelled terrible. If a spark hit the gas, the whole place would blow up. Lucas ordered the men to stop working, told everyone to go to their tents. They would wait for the gas to clear. The men went to bed. They could not sleep. The gas hissed all night. The ground shook a little. Lucas stayed awake. He watched the hole. He knew what was happening. The gas was just a sign. The gas was the lid blowing off a bottle. The liquid was right behind it. Morning came, January 10th, 1901. It was a Thursday. The sun came up. The air was cold. The men came back to the rig. The hissing had stopped a little. Lucas decided to lower the drill pipe back into the hole. Wanted to clean out the bottom. He wanted to see if the oil was there. The men lowered the heavy steel pipe into the hole. The pipe went down, hit the bottom at 10, 20 feet. The ground shook hard. A deep, low rumble came from deep under the earth. It sounded like a giant animal growling. The mud shot up the hole again, but this time it was different. The mud was followed by the drill pipe. The pressure was so strong, it pushed the heavy steel pipe right out of the ground. The 6-inch pipe shot into the air. It went 100 feet high. It twisted and bent into a weird shape. It fell to the ground with a loud crash. Then the liquid came. It shot out of the 6-inch hole in the ground. It was not a trickle. It was not a flow. It was a solid column of dark liquid. It went straight up. It went higher than the wooden derrick. It went over 150 feet in the air. The sound was deafening. It was a roaring, thundering noise. It drowned out the shouts of the men. The liquid was oil. It was dark green and brown. It hit the top of the derrick. The wood broke. The oil sprayed out in all directions. It rained down on the men. The men turned and ran. They ran as fast as they could. They slipped in the mud. They fell down. They got covered in the sticky oil. They were terrified. They thought the earth was exploding. The oil did not stop. It roared out of the ground for hours. It flowed over the flat land. It filled the low spots. It created a river of oil. It ran into the Pine Island Bayou. It turned black. The oil flowed for 9 straight days. No one could stop it. There was no valve. There was no cap. The pressure was too high. Captain Lucas stood there, covered in oil. He stared at the geyser. He did not run. He calculated the flow in his head. Sent a message to his investors in Pittsburgh. The message said the well was producing 100,000 barrels of oil a day. This was a shocking number. The Drake well produced 25 barrels a day. All great wells in Pennsylvania produced a few hundred barrels a day. This well in Texas produced 100,000 barrels a day. It was more oil than the entire world used in a single day. The hill was renamed Spindletop. The name came from a tree on the hill that had a spinning top tied to a branch. But now the name meant something else. It meant the top of the world had spun upside down. The experts were wrong. The geologists were wrong. The one-armed brickmaker was right. The Croatian engineer was right. The news of Spindletop spread fast. The reaction was different this time. There was no slow build of men coming to town. There was a flood. Thousands of people jumped on trains. They came from the north. They came from the east. They came to Beaumont, Texas. The town of Beaumont had 10,000 people. In a few months, it had 50,000 people. There were no rooms to rent. People slept in tents. People slept in boxes. The hotels charged crazy prices. A bed cost $10 a night. A sandwich cost $1. The town was loud. The town was dirty. The streets were mud. The mud was mixed with oil. Everyone wanted a piece of the hill. The land on Spindletop Hill was sold in small pieces. Men bought tiny lots. They put up wooden derricks right next to each other. The derricks were so close, the arms of the pumps hit each other, drilled everywhere. They did not care about the rules. They did not care about the land. They just drilled. And they found oil. Not every well was a gusher, but most of them produced oil. The hill looked like a forest of wooden towers. The sound of the engines never stopped. Day and night, the pumps went up and down, up and down. The consequence of Spindletop was massive. The price of oil dropped again. It dropped to 3 cents a barrel. It was cheaper than water. People used it to dust their roads. They used it to kill weeds. But the low price created a new problem. The oil companies could not make money selling oil for 3 cents. They had to find a way to use the oil that made it valuable. The kerosene market was full. They had too much oil. But oil is not just one thing. It is made of different parts. When you heat crude oil, the kerosene boils off first. The part that boils off next is heavier. It is a thin, clear liquid. It is highly flammable. It explodes easily. For years, the refiners threw this part away. They dumped it in rivers. They burned it in pits. It was a waste product. They called it gasoline. Spindletop changed the value of gasoline. Because the oil was so cheap, men started looking for a way to use the waste. A machine was being built in small shops in the north. It was a carriage with no horse. It had an engine inside. The engine ran on fuel. The fuel it needed was gasoline. The discovery of massive amounts of oil in Texas made the gasoline cheap enough to use. The age of the automobile was about to start. The challenge was no longer finding the oil. Your challenge was building a machine to burn it. The challenge was building roads for the machines to drive on. The quiet, dark world that Edwin Drake knew in 1859 was gone forever. The world was loud. The world was fast. The world ran on oil. And it all started with a bubble of gas in a muddy puddle in Texas.